I just came across a YouTube short that spoke about healing your standards when it comes to dealing with women and any romantic relationship for that matter. And it was a very insightful topic of discussion because oftentimes the same scenario can be interpreted as reducing one's standard. So in this video, I'm going to talk about these little mind games we end up playing with ourselves as prawn addicts. But if you really look at how different prawn is from actual sex and how it really warps your perception of it, then you realize that your standards aren't really high, but your standards are truly fictitious. The kind of women and the kind of fantasies that draws you are stored in the deep recesses of your subconscious mind. It's very difficult for you to pinpoint and look at it from an objective manner. Our sexual preferences are extremely personal in nature. In fact, sometimes we ourselves aren't able to fully explain or fully understand what we truly prefer in women. So you can't really look at yourself from the outside. However, the things in your real life, things that trigger you, hold some sort of a mirror into the workings of your subconscious mind. You see that prawn addiction is one of the most subtle and covert forms of addiction, mainly due to the fact that we often normalize this kind of behavior. It's like we don't even have a proper frame of reference because everyone's an addict. Everyone is relentless in their pursuit of strange fantasies that we consciously know that is out there, but we slowly got acclimated to over time. In fact, the change in your behavior, expectation, and quote-unquote standard of women happens in such a slow and successive manner that you aren't able to tell the difference when you've really crossed the line, so to speak. And every single human interaction seems to fall short of that. This is one of the most rarely discussed effects of prawn addiction, the fact that it saps away our motivation to pursue a fulfilling relationship. And this isn't the most dangerous part of the whole picture, but rather how we justify to ourselves why we aren't pursuing a relationship. And if you haven't guessed already, it is, oh, my standards are too high. I'm working on myself to get such and such grade of women, not realizing that your addiction could be one of the many reasons that has raised the baseline of your expectation. If you're a prawn addict, chances are it isn't that your standards are too high, but rather your arousal mechanisms are screwed up. Another important point is how prawn addiction warps your relationship with sex itself. And so it isn't just a problem with regards to fulfilling those high standards. In fact, prawn addicts who got into relationships often report a very strange discrepancy between the reality of sex they experience and what they subconsciously crave. You see, when you watch two people engage in the act, you're priming yourself to look at the situation and the act as an outsider and not as a participant. In fact, your mind seeks out imageries and scenes that are consistent with those exact same thing. And so it's entirely possible to engage in sexual act and feel like someone who's still craving for more because it's so different from the thing you're fundamentally craving. Your entire sense of sex has changed. There's a reason why prawn addiction is called an addiction, because it really is, and like any other addiction, it really warps your brain and changes it, similar to what drugs and other psychoactive substances do. Sex has always been one of the most primordial motivations for men to carry on their duties. In fact, it's the chase that sort of fascinates us. I know in the NoFap community, we talk about transcending those urges and assign our motivation to something else. But the reason why we preach such extreme measures is only because of our warped expectation and sense of what's real and what isn't. So like all addicts, a prawn addict views such strange fantasies like oxygen, and not in a benign kind of a way. You're more like an oxygen deprived survivor gasping for air, and this spills over to most of your interactions with the opposite sex without you even knowing it. Prawn addiction segregates sex from a complete human experience. Instead of looking at it as an extension of human relationships, we learn to look at it as something to get rid of, an urge we must address in the short term and sort of free ourselves from this jittery, uneasy feeling between our legs. Ever wonder why many prawn addicts report anxiety and inability to keep eye contact with women they meet? To me, it's their human part and their animal part being out of alignment. Instead of working together, the human part is fighting an uphill battle and leashing the primal part of you. Like an addict, you are avoiding the source of your addiction. You avoid it not because there's anything inherently wrong with this source, so to speak, but it's more about how you've conditioned yourself and how you continually interpret this idea of sex. It's difficult for addicts to pinpoint their own addiction. You see, there's always this profound justification of why we do certain things in our life, and the first step is to call our own BS. In fact, if you could acknowledge that there's something inherently wrong with the way you've been viewing sex and human interaction for a long time, that would be the first successful step in you overcoming it. But it is this voices inside our heads that tell us that what we've been doing is quite normal and not out of the ordinary. Your ego wants to protect you from any external challenges, and so anything that threatens its own structure often gets eliminated through this justification mechanism inside your head. Like unfit people who can't hit the gym on a regular basis keep telling themselves that it's only because they're too busy. If only life allowed them to work out, they would be in the gym every single day. So your ego has a justification as to why you aren't finding any women who are attractive to you. And I'm not speaking in terms of a relationship, but rather in your environment, in places you go. If you catch yourself realizing that there aren't too many attractive women, one of the possibilities is this justification by your ego protecting itself under the guise of you having really high standards. What's scary is that this justification makes sense on the surface and lines up perfectly with having ambitions and difficult goals in life. So even before you venture forth into seeking out better options in life, it's way more important to declutter and clear this dark lens with which you've been viewing the world around you. I've always stated this countless times that I don't preach NoFap as the ultimate solution for all your problems of sexual nature or with regards to relationships. To me, it's merely a tool that is extreme, but it is the only antidote potent enough to tackle such an adverse addiction, or rather an epidemic of addiction that's existing in our youth today. I generally believe that if you take the first step towards NoFap, and even if you fail at it, it has the capacity to shake some of the justifications that prevent you from detecting this addiction. So let's say you try for 3 days and fail at NoFap, and after relapse, the excuse you come up with is that addressing these urges is a very natural thing to do. But despite what you think the reason is as to why you relapsed, you can't really eliminate the fact that you actually relapsed, that you actually failed from something, that you failed a challenge shortly after starting it. And so this realization does wonders for the healing process. Another important aspect of NoFap, especially counting days, is that you're able to gauge your progress. I know that there are some purists who recommend that you don't count days, but this is for people who have had previous successes in this journey. In fact, I'll argue that if you don't count, then you won't be taking those small victories. And while the process of getting free from any addiction is fairly binary and fairly black and white, there's virtue in very modest progress. The first time I survived NoFap was for a period of 120 days, and it just didn't happen right off the bat. In fact, my first streak was 3, then it was 7, then it was 14, and then the fourth one was this number. So if I just gave up and labeled myself as this loser or things of that similar nature in the first 2 streaks, then chances were that I would have found myself in the same place again and again. So you see how NoFap isn't just super woo-woo, super spiritual stuff. The idea isn't to permanently do NoFap or semen retention, but being able to consciously put a leash on these extremely haphazard voices in your head that make you lose your impulse control. You'll find countless testimonials on the internet of people who've noticed subtle changes and how they feel after they've ventured out into this journey of NoFap. And while gaining superpowers is a bit of a stretch, the most definitive changes they all notice is in the way they feel, and it's due to healing of dopamine receptors. So I wouldn't stretch my discussion for too long. I hope you learned something very important with regards to how the mind of a prawn addict works in justifying its own behavior, and how NoFap can help you transcending it, at least enable you to take the first step towards success. Thanks for watching the entire video. See you soon in the next one.
Thank you for watching the entire video. If you want to get notifications on our upcoming videos, do not forget to hit the subscribe button and join our army. And also, I'd really appreciate if you hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm to recommend this video to like-minded individuals. As always, it was a pleasure talking to you.